I was working on something completely different, an academic project, reviewing patents in biochemical synthesis. Dry, technical, forgettable. Then I saw it. Patent hashtag US 11804922B, filed in 2022 by a biotech startup working on nanotransmutation catalysts. I clicked out of habit, and at the bottom of the references, mixed in with scientific journals and white papers, was one line that didn't belong. Si libere d'arte transmutationis, 1604, Basel Codex. A book from the 1600s, in a modern US patent. I copied the name, searched the national libraries. Nothing. Searched blacklisted manuscripts. There it was, a redacted listing. Access restricted by ecclesiastical order, 1782. Refiled under philosophical artifacts. What kind of book gets cited in 2022, but banned for centuries? I finally found a private scan, low resolution, watermarked, uploaded anonymously in 2014. Most of it was in Latin, but one page had a modern note written in English, added by whoever uploaded it. This formula matches the isotope shift chart from Berkelium decay experiments, 1986. That's not alchemy. That's nuclear physics. I stared at the scanned page. It showed a series of rotating symbols in a circle. Not just astrological icons, but letters, ratios, numerals. It looked like a mandala, but with math hidden in the petals. And around it, written in ink that had faded into near invisibility. Transmutation is not transformation. It is resonant realignment. No philosopher's stone, no gold from lead, just resonance. So I looked deeper into the patent. It described a synthetic membrane that could induce molecular phase shift under controlled harmonic excitation. And in the test data, a diagram almost identical to the one in the book. Same circles, same sequence of ratios. Two documents, 418 years apart, and they matched. I emailed the patent holder. Just one question. Did you really reference a 1604 alchemy book in a biochemical process? No reply. But the next day, the reference disappeared from the public version of the patent. Archived copies still had it, but the live version? Sanitized, as if someone saw what I saw and decided the connection should remain invisible. I tried to let it go, but I couldn't, because if that diagram was real, if the ratios weren't symbolic, but functional, then alchemy never died. It just got reclassified. Most people think alchemy was symbolic. They imagine cryptic drawings, mythical beasts, poetic riddles. They forget that the best way to hide real knowledge is to wrap it in metaphor. But what I found in Libere d'arte transmutationis wasn't metaphor, it was math. Page 47. A circular diagram labeled Orbis Elementrum, the wheel of elements. At first glance, typical medieval nonsense. A lion devouring the sun, a chalice, a snake eating its tail. But the numbers, they didn't belong. Ratios like 1.618, 2.73, 137.035. Constants from quantum physics, atomic structure, and golden geometry. This wasn't mysticism. It was measurement. One line, written in dense Latin, translated roughly to, lead is but a slowed sun, gold a quickened one. Another said, time coils within the atom. To alter matter, one must bend the coil, not the shell. That's not poetry. That's a description of isotope shift. The more I read, the more I realized. Alchemy wasn't about turning lead to gold. That was the cover. The real art was in frequency manipulation, a method to shift elements not through force, but through resonance, vibration, phase, tone. They were using sound, geometry, heat, not to synthesize gold, but to reprogram atomic structure. And here's where it gets terrifying. The symbols they used for the philosopher's stone weren't solid objects. They were waveforms. I fed one sequence into a sound frequency generator. Expected noise. Instead, I got a clear, harmonic tone. A perfect fifth interval, just like in sacred music tuning. I layered the tone over a spectrogram, and the shape that appeared? A tetrahedron inside a circle. That's not just mysticism. That's quantum geometry. the same structure seen in particle spin models. How could a 1604 book describe something that wouldn't be proven until 2018? I ran more tests. Every page, every formula, they weren't random. They were instructions, but not for how to build something, for how to tune something. Maybe a machine, maybe a substance, maybe a human. Because one section talked not about metals, but about memory. What has become leaden in the soul can be refined if passed thrice through the fire of ratio. What fire? What ratio? And what happens when the transmutation isn't about metal, but about the mind? After the third night of translating, I finally found a name, tucked in the margin of Liber de Arte Transmutationis, written in smaller, sharper hand, a postscript, almost like a signature, as recorded by B.V., servant of the furnace. B.V. I thought it was nothing, but the scan's file name had metadata. Hidden among the upload logs was a note in Cyrillic, added by the uploader. Valentinus equals Wellington Bazir. Crosscheck. Dresden Archive. Manuscript 502/16. Basil Valentine. The name sounded familiar. I ran a search, and here's what I found. Alleged author of the 12 Keys of Basil Valentine. A monk, an alchemist, a healer. Lived in the late 1400s or early 1500s. Or maybe didn't live at all. Most historians say Basil Valentine never existed, that he was a pen name, a myth, a literary device. But if that's true, why was his name listed in a modern biotech patent? I went back to the document that started this. Patent hashtag US 11804922B. And there it was, hidden in the body of the text, not the references. A formula titled Valentine's Transfer Constant. I ran the equation through Wolfram Alpha. The math didn't just work. It matched a set of ratios from nuclear decay pathways, specifically isotopic drift in radioactive metals. This wasn't an homage. This was a direct lift. Someone in the 21st century had copied a formula from someone in the 15th and tried to pass it off as new. I dug deeper, searched scientific papers, books, historical indexes. Any reference to Valentine's constant before 2020? Nothing. And any reference to Basil Valentine after 1984? Scrubbed. Except one. A declassified CIA translation file released under FOIA. In the header, typed in caps, excerpt from the Valentine Code, German Intel Acquisition 1946, Class 4. It included only 3 lines. 1. Transmutation does not require ignition, only alignment. 2. Elixirs are not chemical, they are fields. 3. The gold they sought was never metal. I searched for more, but the PDF was only 2 pages long. The original document? Transferred to civilian research contractor, project code, Bell 76. That code looked familiar. I checked my Tesla archive notes. Die Glocke, the bell, a Nazi-era experiment tied to gravity, time, and, some say, dimensional resonance. And someone linked it to Basil Valentine. That's when I realized Valentine wasn't just a monk. He wasn't just a myth. He was a bridge between religion and science, between mystery and mechanism. And someone, or some group, had spent decades making sure we believed he was never real. Because if he was, then the line between alchemy and technology disappears. And the philosopher's stone might not have been a stone at all. When you say alchemy, people laugh. They picture bearded men boiling lead in bronze pots, trying to get rich by making gold. But here's the thing. We already do that. Every day. In labs. With real results. We call it nuclear transmutation. And no one laughs. Because it's science now. In 1980, scientists at the Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory used a particle accelerator to convert bismuth into gold. Real gold. Not a lot. The process cost more than the output. But it proved the principle. Elements can be changed. All it takes is pressure, heat, or the right energetic alignment. Sound familiar? In the 1990s, Japan's Riken Institute accidentally created a new isotope during silicon doping experiments. The byproduct had no known source. It didn't match any element used in the lab, and yet it formed. One scientist wrote, It's as if the material realigned itself around a different atomic intent. They called it a quantum phase anomaly. An alchemist would have called it the metal remembering its higher state. And then there's CERN. The Large Hadron Collider has repeatedly caused temporary formation of unstable elements, brief flashes of matter that exist for milliseconds. But the math behind those events? It echoes a ratio from Liber de Arte Transmutationis. I checked it myself. Same spiral geometry, same numeric intervals, same harmonic curve. So what changed? Why is it science now, but used to be heresy? Because now it's expensive, controlled, owned. Alchemy failed not because it was wrong, but because it couldn't be patented. And the irony, the closer we get to mastering atomic transformation, the further we drift from asking why ancient minds knew this already. I found a research paper published in 2015. Topic: Spontaneous element shift under low-frequency EM exposure. It was scrubbed from most databases, but one quote stuck with me. Controlled resonance across non-ionizing bands may lead to electron shell instability in heavy metals. In plain English, sound plus time equals elemental change. Not collision, not fusion. Resonance. Exactly what the old texts claimed. And you know what's cheaper than a particle accelerator? A metal plate, a spiral coil, and a tone generator. So maybe the question isn't, can we transmute elements? The question is, who gets to do it, and who isn't allowed to remember how? At some point, the metals stopped making sense. I kept translating diagrams, recalculating ratios, expecting physical outcomes. Heat, pressure, phase shift, but the margins kept whispering something else. Phrases like, purify not the lead, but the will. The vessel is the self. Align the 7 before turning the 8th. They weren't talking about ore. They were talking about people. I returned to the page labeled the universal spiral. To modern eyes, it looks like art, a swirl of concentric circles wrapped in planetary symbols. But a neuroscientist I consulted, anonymously, had a different take. That's not decoration, she said. That's a frequency staircase. Each layer maps to a known brainwave band. Delta, theta, alpha, beta, gamma, conscious states. And in the center, a blank circle. No symbol, no note, just space. She told me. In neurofeedback, that's what we aim for. That empty center, the observer, the brain's silence. The philosopher's stone wasn't a rock. It was a neurological frequency. Other pages confirmed it. They weren't just working with metals. They were mapping the human condition. Each element a mirror of the soul. Lead represented fear. Heavy, slow, dense. The weight we carry when we're stuck in survival. Tin reflected anxiety. Quick, nervous, restless. The spinning thoughts that never settle. Iron embodied anger. Hot, reactive, sharp. It could cut or protect. And gold. Gold was balance, equilibrium, a state beyond chaos. When the mind clears and the heart shines. Gold wasn't a metal to be made. It was a state to be reached. This wasn't chemistry. It was psychoalchemy. Each metal represented a state of mind. Each reaction, an emotional shift. And when I reread the transmutation rituals, they looked eerily familiar. Repetition of tones, controlled breathing, visualization, geometric focus, a final silence. That's not a spell. That's meditative entrainment. Today we call it biofeedback, neural resonance, brainwave optimization. In 1604, they called it alchemy. But the real clue came from an experiment I didn't expect. I layered an alchemical resonance diagram over an MRI heat map of the brain under gamma stimulation. It aligned perfectly. The spirals mapped directly onto regions activated during peak flow states. Clarity, empathy, integration. The stone didn't change metals. It changed how you see. And I remembered something from earlier. To alter matter, bend the coil. If you shift consciousness, you shift perception. If you shift perception, you redefine reality. So maybe the philosopher's stone isn't an object. Maybe it's a process, a tuning of the body, the brain, and the will into something stable, aligned. and unshakable, a human being who cannot be ruled by fear, cannot be hijacked by chaos, cannot be sold false light, and that kind of being is the greatest threat of all. For centuries, people searched for the philosopher's stone, a red powder, a crystalline shard, a glowing mineral. But the deeper I went, the clearer it became. There was never a stone. There was only a system. And like any system, you can learn it, decode it, run it. In one of the final pages of Liber de Arte Transmutationis, there's a strange diagram. Not a circle, not a triangle, but a grid, rows and columns, symbols, numbers, lunar phases, and musical intervals. At the top it reads, Processus lapidus, non corpus, sed ratio. The stone is not a body, but a pattern. I scanned it, converted it into a matrix, and that's when I saw it. Every row formed a sequence, the same kind used in algorithmic modulation. Each symbol matched a value in modern signal encoding. I ran the sequence through a MIDI synthesizer. The result? A melodic pattern in the key of D minor. Slow, symmetrical, recursive. A musical loop. The philosopher's stone was never an object. It was a process of repetition, like a mantra or a code. And here's the most chilling part. I found a nearly identical pattern in a DARPA white paper from 2011, Behavioral Resonance and Autonomous Synchronization in Human Cognitive Systems. Page 42 shows a sequence of tones, used to entrain group emotional states, almost note for note what was written in the 1604 manuscript, what alchemists once called the transmutation sequence. Modern science now calls emotion protocol alignment. I started cross-referencing ancient diagrams with software logic trees, and it fit. Every ritual, fire, water, symbols, chants, mapped perfectly to a step-by-step loop. Input compression, alignment release, or in modern terms, data filtering resonance output. The philosopher's stone wasn't just a key to transformation. It was an executable, a loop the mind could run, a sequence that the body could entrain. A way to rewrite internal code. No wonder the church banned it. No wonder the states buried it. This wasn't just magic. It was open-source consciousness engineering. 400 years before we even had the language to describe it. And today, it's resurfacing. In meditation apps, in brainwave headsets, in sound therapy clinics. They don't call it the philosopher's stone. They call it optimization. But it's the same code, just running on different hardware. We're told that alchemists were burned for sorcery, that their crime was heresy, their sin, forbidden knowledge. But the truth? They weren't feared because they made gold. They were feared because they made independent minds. Inquisitional records from the late 1500s mention practitioners of transformation, but rarely describe physical experiments. Instead, the charges say, disruptors of obedience, promoters of internal authority, preachers of direct connection with the divine. This wasn't about transmutation. This was about self-rule. One file, translated from the Vatican Secret Archives in 1948, describes the trial of a man known only as Brother H. His offense: he claimed that the human vessel can be harmonized without confession, that grace lives in breath, not penance, that a man aligned in himself is ruled by no crown nor cloth. He was burned 2 days later. Another record from Nuremberg, 1610. The accused was found with a copper disc etched with rotating patterns. He said it helped him remember who he really was. They destroyed the disc and buried the man in an unmarked grave, not because of what he built, because of what he understood. Alchemists were dangerous not for their tools, but for their results. They produced men and women who didn't obey out of fear, didn't need external salvation, didn't respond to manipulation, couldn't be taxed by illusion. A soul in resonance is not a soul in chains, and power structures have always known. A person aligned with truth no longer needs a middleman. In one surviving text, The Secret Furnace, 1612, there's a quote that still gives me chills. They come not for my body, but for my stillness. They fear not what I do, but what I have stopped needing. Alchemy was never about fire. It was about silence, and those who reached it No longer bowed, not to kings, not to priests, not even to God as taught by others, because they had found the divine within. And that's what made them enemies of the system. They didn't break the rules. They made rules irrelevant. I thought I was done with the manuscript, but one night, something pulled me back. I reopened page 73 of Liber d'Arte Transmutationis. It was a diagram I had dismissed before, just interlocking circles inside a hexagon. But this time I paused, because I'd seen that shape somewhere else. I pulled up a technical diagram from a 2017 patent. Neuroresponsive feedback loop with harmonic stability grid, filed by a company working on emotional regulation headsets. And there it was, the exact same shape, same nodes, same intersections, same pattern of six-fold rotational symmetry. It wasn't decoration, it was architecture. I started digging, and suddenly it was everywhere, in antenna design schematics, in phase control algorithms for adaptive AI, even in the layout of superconducting quantum processors. The geometry of transformation was alive and well, just without the robes, without the Latin, without the soul. I searched public patents with keywords: harmonic modulation, resonant array, emotional entrainment. The most cited design: a spiral matrix of 12 rings around a central core. I froze. That's the Wheel of Salt, a well-known alchemical diagram from 1598. But in this context, it wasn't spiritual. It was described as a behavioral compliance scaffold. They'd taken the geometry of awakening and re-engineered it for behavioral conditioning. The same angles, the same math, but reversed. Instead of freedom, predictability. Instead of transmutation, stabilization. And the companies building this tech, they don't make potions. They make wearables, military-grade neurotraining systems, algorithms that learn how you feel before you know it. And they're using symbols that were once whispered over firelight in secret rooms by men who were hunted for it. Here's the cruel irony. The patterns that once led to liberation now lead to monetization. The sacred shapes are still here, but their meaning has been inverted. Alchemy hasn't died. It's been outsourced. We grew up thinking the elixir of life was a drink, a vial, a glowing liquid in a glass bottle. But what if that was just a metaphor? What if the real elixir wasn't something you swallowed, but something you heard? In the last pages of Liber d'Arte Transmutationis, there's a strange line. Distill the 7 tones. Let the 8th be silence. Then life shall not decay. It didn't make sense at first, but when I ran the phrase through a tonal analyzer and matched it with the geometric intervals found earlier, something clicked. 7 tones, not random notes, but specific frequencies, each separated by precise harmonic ratios. I generated them using a tone synth, played them through good headphones, closed my eyes. At first, nothing. Then my breath slowed, my chest lightened, and something deep inside me felt clear. Not excited, not euphoric. Still, that night I slept for 10 hours straight. No dreams, no racing thoughts, just black, quiet, and peace. The next day, I went deeper. I took one of the original alchemical spirals, the Auris Vitae, or Ear of Life, mapped the angles to frequencies, layered the tones according to the diagram structure. The result? A pulsing binaural rhythm that shifted slightly every 33 seconds. I didn't tell my brain what to feel. It just felt it. I checked my vitals, heart rate, blood pressure, cortisol levels, all lower, all consistent. No placebo, no suggestion, just a tone. Then I found something else. In a 1999 clinical trial on chronic inflammation, researchers found that exposing cells to 528 Hz for 20 minutes reduced oxidative stress markers by 34%. Guess what frequency sits at the heart of the Auris Vitae spiral? 528 Hz. The elixir of life wasn't molecular. It was vibrational, a sequence of frequencies that realign biology, calm the nervous system, and maybe extend life by reducing cellular chaos. I dug into bioacoustics patents. One from 2008 described a life extension harmonic array, designed to restore mitochondrial rhythm through tonal entrainment. The diagram, a mirror image of an alchemical wave map from 1611. We're not making the elixir, we're rediscovering it. And this time, it's not in bottles, it's in meditation apps, breathing techniques, binaural soundscapes, even cathedral architecture. Because those high, arching domes, they echo the same 7 tones. Alchemy was never about drinking eternal youth. It was about tuning the human instrument to the frequency of balance. And when that happens, you don't just live longer, you live clearer. I used to think the philosopher's stone was a destination, a final secret, a last page in the book. But now I understand. It was never about the stone. It was about what remained after everything else was gone. Not all stones became gold. Some became silence. Not absence, but alignment. The kind of stillness that stays with you when the noise fades, when the rituals end, when you've stopped chasing and started listening. Because that's what alchemy was always about. Not power, not glory, presence. I keep hearing it now. Not with my ears, but somewhere between the breath and the bones. In quiet rooms, in light through stained glass, in the spaces between my thoughts. There's a hum. Low, steady, familiar. I played the tones again. The ones from the spiral, from the stone, from the book. This time, I didn't analyze them. I just listened, and I realized something. The philosopher's stone wasn't made to change the world. It was made to change your relationship to it. Not to escape chaos, but to stop being ruled by it. Not to control time, but to remember you are more than its victim. Not to cheat death, but to harmonize with life. And those who found the stone, they didn't become gods. They became quiet, untouchable not by walls or weapons, but by illusion. And in a world addicted to control, silence is the loudest rebellion. I don't know if anyone else will find what I did. Maybe they'll never believe it. Maybe they'll never need to. But I know this. Somewhere, under all the tech and theory and noise, the stone still hums. And if you ever hear it, if the world falls quiet enough for even a moment, follow the sound.